everybody, my name's Megan Beeker and this is my introduction video for EDL 850 School Law. So a little bit about me. I'm a 2014 graduate of Kansas State University. My major was elementary education, but I went back a year later and got an endorsement in English language arts. So I taught sixth grade for a year, and now I'm currently the junior high English language arts teacher for our district. I've been married for 3.5 years. There's a picture of my husband down below this video. He's the high school history teacher here in the district, and together we have a Boston Terrier named Marvin. I have very strong roots in education. My father was a high school principal for 38 years, and he just recently retired. And my sister works as a math coach for the Salina Public Schools. So we definitely have a lot of educational conversation around the dinner table when we get together. I'm currently working towards my master's in instructional technology. So a little bit about my district. I work in Hoxie, USD 412. It's a two-way school. So if you're not familiar with the way that Kansas structures its school, a two-way, it kind of differs, but we have approximately 450 schools total in our district. So we have approximately 25 to 40 students per grade level. We also have Title I support at the elementary school. Hoxie is a relatively wealthy community. It's rural. It's located in northwest Kansas. And as you can see from the picture below, Hoxie has good crops and great families. So all the families here are very supportive, and education is something that is held very high in our community. Hoxie has approximately 1,200 people in it. So, federal support of public schools. According to a source that I found, it provides approximately 8% of funding for public school organizations. That was from the federal role in education from the United States Department of Education. It's to provide policy guidance for public schools nationwide, and it has a hand in what students learn, how they learn, where they learn, but it ultimately leaves it up to the state governments to decide how schools were run in that state. State support for public schools. It's to manage all Kansas schools for the federal government, essentially. So the Kansas Board of Education kind of sets the standards and expectations of Kansas schools. This includes teacher licensure, standards that we follow as a district, things like that, to help adopt and set state-level standards for schools, provide state funding, and then recently it issued a mandate that all Kansas schools will cease face-to-face instruction for the remainder of the 2019-2020 school year due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So in wake of that, they've provided a guidance packet for continuous learning that I'm going to dive into over spring break. We are currently on spring break, so I've got a little bit of time to think about how I'm going to provide that instruction for my students that is both educational, beneficial, but doesn't take too much time out of their days right now. So local support for public schools. We have a district board of education. These members are selected via an election. The Board of Education must follow these guidelines and standards that are selected by both our state and our federal government. From guidelines and standards, the District Board of Education then creates policy and rules that will fit for our local schools to function. And then property tax also contributes money towards local funding for public schools. So I made this little info chart, or this, I guess, flow chart, if you will, of the who's in charge scenario. So at the federal level, we have the United States Department of Education. They're kind of overarching everything. The Secretary of Education for the United States right now is Betsy DeVos. So she's kind of the one that controls the regulation of what the Department of Education is doing. Then below that, at the state level, we have our governor, Laura Kelly, as well as the Kansas Department of Education. They work closely together. The Kansas Board of Education then chooses a commissioner that answers to the Board of Education. The commissioner acts kind of like the Secretary of Education in the fact that they make sure that things are functioning the way that they need to in Kansas schools. And then at a local level, we have a USD 412 Board of Education. They take care of the schools within the USD 412 district, which includes Hoxie High School as well as Hoxie Hoxie Junior Senior High, as well as Hoxie Elementary School. And from that, we have a superintendent, Jim Howard, who is underneath the Board of Education and responds to the Board of Education. Our building administrator at the junior senior high level is Mark Wildeman. And then, of course, the teachers and staff respond to both our building administrator as well as our superintendent, as well as our Board of Education. So just to kind of reiterate a little, the U.S. Department of Education, their job is to make sure that that states are providing the proper funding, that we are all on the same page when it comes to providing equal opportunity for those employed as well as for students and meeting the requirements set by the United States of America. The Secretary of Education works as a liaison between the President of the United States and the U.S. Department of Education. It's also responsible for guiding activities connected to the U.S. Department of Education. All of these positions are paid, and they provide some funding, but for the most part, it's up to states to provide the proper amount of funding. At the state level, we have our Governor, Laura Kelly, as well as the Kansas Department of Education, and underneath that, or within that, is the Kansas Board of Education and our Commissioner of Education, Dr. Randy Watson. So I took this about us directly from the Kansas Department of Education website. Basically, our KSDE is in charge of education, standards and assessment, special education services, child nutrition and wellness, Title I program services, career and technical education, and financial aid. The ultimate goal is to make sure that all Kansas students leave their schooling with what it takes to be global leaders and have global success. The Commissioner of Education, Randy Watson, is responsible for the day-to-day management of the KSDE. All of these positions are paid, and they hold the most power over public schools because they are the ones that provide funding and accreditation status. And then at the local level, our local District Board of Education, they're in charge of the hiring and evaluation of the superintendent, but also the hiring of building administrators, teachers, other staff members, things like that. They create policies for the school within the district, and then they follow state guidelines to assure that they meet accreditation status. Our superintendent, Jim Howard, he's to govern over the entire school district, report back to the local Board of Education about what's going on within our schools and the things that we need. Building administration is Mark Wildeman. He's our principal for the junior senior high school. He's to govern over the school building and ensure that policies and procedures are being followed, and then report back to the local Board of Education and superintendent about what is going on within the building. All these positions are paid with the exception of our local Board of Education members. So applaud and thank your local Board of Education members because this is something that they do on a volunteer basis. So influences of the NELP Standard 6. So component 6.1, I think, is influenced most by local school district. The local school district is kind of the hand of the state when it comes to, it provides policies, procedures, kind of the everyday business of a school, which should be enforced by the local administration and the district board of education. So they kind of act as those that they kind of make sure that everything runs well on a day-to-day basis. Component 6.2 is influenced most by the state governing entity, so that would include KSDE, our governor, things like that. It involves providing data to ensure that our state and schools are meeting those requirements. So we have things like state testing and other tests that we take to show that our school is meeting the standard or exceeding the standard. And then component 6.3 is influenced by the federal governing entity. The roles and responsibility involve the passing of bills and laws to ensure that all students are given an equal opportunity to public education and that all institutions are equal opportunity employers. So how does this all relate to the educational well-being? Our federal government just ensures that states are providing the funding that's needed for students to be successful. Obviously, our federal government wants schools to be successful because that means that those in education are going to be our leaders down the road. They're going to be our doctors, our lawyers, the next president of the United States. So we need to make sure that we are holding our standards high as a country. The state government ensures that these policies and procedures are in place to encourage all schools within the state to follow these guidelines. Um, and through this, they provide funding to those who comply. So state accreditation means that you get a certain amount of funding, things like that. Local districts work towards developing policy and procedure that works best for the students and the teachers in that area. So obviously, up here in uh, small Hoxie and sparsely populated Northwest Kansas, our rules and regulations and the things that we follow are probably going to be very different than Wichita Public School District or um, any other larger areas of the state. So it's our job to ensure that these procedures and policies are carried out to achieve the state's accreditation status and receive funding. These are my references. Hopefully my video wasn't too scattered today. I know that a lot of you who are in teaching right now, your brains are probably pretty scattered with everything that's going on. So I wish you all the absolute best on this next endeavor, and I like to see this as an opportunity. It is a challenge, but definitely an opportunity for our students to learn a little bit more about themselves and for me to learn a little bit more about my teaching styles. So thank you all for listening. I hope you guys have a fantastic day, and I will see you all soon.